back on Mornings with Joe Catenacci. Filling in here, Yaël Ossowski. We're broadcasting on the Big Talker, 106.7 FM. For our next guest, she is no stranger to these airwaves. We're speaking with Ashley Baker. She's the Director of Policy at the Committee for Justice and a founder of the Alliance on Antitrust. Ashley, thanks so much for coming on the morning program.
Thank you for having me.
So we've had you on to give out your expertise on various bills, not just bills, but also confirmations. You're someone who follows the justice scene very closely. You follow what's happening with the courts, with lawsuits. And we wanted to get you on because we're hearing about all these new legislative actions that will come related to antitrust from the House. Wanted to get your take. Are these something that we should worry about, those of us who care about our freedoms online, or is this something that is just symbolic?
Well, I think a little bit of both, actually. So there's a lot going on in antitrust right now. Obviously, it's in all branches of government, actually, in both the House and the Senate. More recently with the House, and just here recently, we had the introduction of 5 bills at once, which were all pretty much expected to come down at once. I know Representative Cicilline has told the media quite a bit that his strategy was to basically break up a larger proposal into lots of bills and try to ram it through. So he was pretty forthcoming about that. The thing is, the bills, a lot of them didn't really make much sense, and they imposed much broader regulation than some of the other proposals out there. And some of the other proposals in the Senate, for example, by Senator Klobuchar, it's kind of a more wholesale package. And although I disagree with her proposal, it does get at foundational antitrust laws instead of handing all of the power to the bureaucracy and kind of putting a DMA type structure, Digital Markets Act, like what is in Europe, on our system. So those 5 bills, there was some overlap, but they regulated the way these businesses operate and what they're allowed to do, whether or not they can sell their own products in their own platform, and whether or not they can make acquisitions. And it pretty much bans any new acquisitions from large companies that it very cleverly carves out as a covered entity.
Wow, that just seems like a lot of fun for lawyers in the future. So there'll definitely be a big there. I haven't taken the time to do so on the air, but do have to send you congratulations for appearing up there in Congress. You were there to give your own testimony. What was the hearing about, and what was that like, being able to testify? I gather someone like you, your phone must be quite busy. And Ashley, we should mention, North Carolina native, originally from Gastonia, making us proud up there in D.C.
Thank you. Yes, so that was back in March. It now seems like forever ago. And I testified in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee, Antitrust Subcommittee, and what was kind of this session's first big hearing in that committee to kick off some of the larger reform proposals, such as Chairwoman Klobuchar's her broader bill that she had introduced about a month beforehand. And the nature of the hearing is really kind of a broader overview of identifying any problems with current antitrust law and whether or not we should take a different approach more broadly.
I see. Yeah. And I think that, this is something that I'm always trying to explain to people, because many of these cases seem very complicated. You throw the term antitrust. Most people haven't heard this apart from high school, a little bit from trust busting. Is this a sort of a new era of, I hate to say it, American capitalism, whereby every single move by a business player is going to be under scrutiny? Or do you think this is something that is solely reserved for tech companies, mostly coming out of Silicon Valley?
Well, this isn't the first time this has happened historically. If you look back, there was a pro-antitrust craze, obviously dating back to the Sherman Act thing going forward, in the 1950s, then the 1960s, and then again with Ralph Nader in the 1990s, early 2000s against Microsoft. Every so often that's happened, and the target has not always necessarily been tech. It's been railroads or tobacco or others. But there has always been some sort of anti-big business or anti-banks, and the case more recently of the financial crisis. So I think you have that populist element. What you don't see as much is what is different is the two sides of the debate and how those who are on the Republican side want to achieve a completely different objective through using antitrust than those on the left who would like to use it to micromanage the entire economy. And that's bound to have very bad outcomes when you're working towards, two separate, completely different problems.
Yeah, let's
And
talk
none of them
about
are
that.
antitrust related.
Let's talk about that for a second, because we're obviously on conservative radio, and I've battled out with our usual host, Joe Catenacci, on this topic and many others. Many on the right are upset with tech companies because of what they see as bias, whether it be in moderation, in the accounts, in political giving, and how they cover stories or how they censor various stories related to Hunter Biden or the election. But there seems to be this kind of wavering of what used to be, the free enterprise part of our political system. Usually that was the Republican Party, it was the conservative movement. But we have cracks in that. Is that something that we can attribute to Donald Trump? Is it that populism that you mentioned before? Or is it just a general hostility to many of these companies and their political values?
Well, I've disagreed with colleagues on this as well, but I do think there absolutely is anti-conservative bias, and it's pretty pervasive by these companies. And I think it's pretty undisputable at this point that some of their actions have disproportionately affected conservatives almost every single time. However, I think antitrust is really the wrong tool to use for this. To be clear, I mean, I'm completely in favor of enforcing our current antitrust laws, but just because of an incident involving bias, it doesn't mean that we need to change the underlying legal standard. We just need to enforce it. And a lot of these problems lie outside of the realm of antitrust. And what the left wants to use the antitrust for is, every left-wing agenda item on the books, income inequality, racial equality, things that they're not able to accomplish necessarily legislatively. Antitrust is a really powerful tool to do those things.
You're listening to Mornings with Joe Catenacci here on the Big Talker, 106.7 FM. Yaël Ossowski filling in for your beautiful Wednesday morning out here on the Wilmington coast. We're speaking with Ashley Baker. She's the Director of Policy at Committee for Justice and a founder of the Alliance on Antitrust. So another thing, Ashley, that is sort of always popping up, especially when it comes to what is happening with the new administration, has to do with the makeup and the shaping of our court system. And I know a lot of people have discussed in the past what would happen to the number of Supreme Court justices. That was the conversation on court packing, which we heard a lot during the election and the beginning part of the Biden administration. Is court packing something that is still being viewed as legitimate? Are there still people there on Capitol Hill who are pushing it? And if that's the case, why do you think that would be harmful to our court system, to our justice system, and perhaps to the branches of our government at the federal level?
Sure. So the court packing debate is definitely alive and well. There are definitely left-leaning advocacy groups that have been pushing it for a while to expand the court by as many as 4 more justices, demand justice, or as I call them now, demand justices, and general justice a lot. And Biden would not give an answer on whether or not he supported court packing during his entire campaign. And until now, he has not. Although in 1983, he said it was a boneheaded idea, but he's also been known to be pushed around by these groups. So he also established a commission on court reform that will evaluate public proposals and write a report, but they won't really make any actionable recommendations. The thing about the court packing debate, though, is the harm is done in making the argument. So making arguments to reform the Supreme Court, particularly by adding justices, is exactly what FDR did in 1937, and he did not have nearly enough congressional support to get by with that. But then you had the infamous decision in which the justice, switch in time that saved 9. It's a threat on the institution, and just that threat being present in the eyes of Democrats to achieve certain policy outcomes. And there was a cert grant in a case that is abortion related too. So that means that the pressure on the court is up.
And one thing that you're often invited to comment on are a number of Supreme Court decisions or cases. Have there been any lately that perhaps have not gotten, full press coverage, things that we should either be wary of or things to celebrate? I know there's the Supreme Court season that's happening, and I know there's probably a lot of decisions that are still coming. Is there anything that you're anticipating you think that the listeners would profit from hearing about?
Yes, it's definitely Supreme Court season and antitrust season right now, both. So last week, the court decided a case, Van Buren, which dealt with cyber crimes. Essentially, it was kind of an overcriminalization issue, which it made routine access to certain types of data a criminal offense, and there was a definitely good opinion in that. To be an interesting breakdown of the court too. It wasn't 5-4 on normal party type lines either. So I thought that was interesting. And a lot of the opinions really come in the last 2 weeks or so of the term. Google versus Oracle is the big one that we were following, and when the ones in addition to Van Buren that we filed an amicus brief in. And we were quite disappointed in the outcome of that, actually, and in Justice Breyer's opinion, and giving the court power that it did not have to dictate copyright policy.
Well, that's North Carolina's own Ashley Baker. She's the Director of Policy at the Committee for Justice and a founder of Alliance on Antitrust. You can follow her on Twitter @AndAshleySays. Ashley, thanks so much for coming on the program this morning.
Thanks for having me.
All right, guys, we'll be right back after these messages. Stay tuned. Big Talker.